Okay, I think we're going live. I still have to click it in LinkedIn maybe here. I hope it auto populates here soon. We'll see. Won't it do it? Allison told me that there might be a lag here. So I'm hoping something here goes. Oh, here we go. Cool. Live. Okay, I think we're live in both places now. Which,
Yay.
amazing. If that actually worked, I'm shocked. So, hello everyone to the dozens of people that listen to us and a few people in the public chat. I'm thrilled to try to host this week. Our fearless leader, Allison, is gallivanting in the UK for this week. So I'm left holding the reins, but luckily for me, I am joined by Carolyn Rhim, who I missed the last time you were on the podcast. So this you only come when one of us is available, I guess. um, but maybe for the sake of the folks that also missed that episode, since you were one of our first guests, do you want to do a quick intro and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. Gosh, I've spent my entire career in medical devices. It started with an internship at Medtronic in college, and I've never looked back. So, coming from a materials engineering background, I was just really intrigued with how materials were placed in the body, how the body reacted to it, and that naturally led to the medical device space. And so, started off in the cardiovascular engineering, cardiovascular device spaces. Decided grad school was a good idea and went to graduate school and did that, but then landed at FDA, and that's where you, Nilo, and I connected, and as well as Allison, and so we have that history there. But after FDA, I went to a larger consulting firm. I worked out of their DC office for a few years, and then launched my own thing called Avera Regulatory Advisors, where I kind of have more control over how we do the types of projects we take on, what we take on, and the manner in which we do our work. So I've been doing that since. So I've been in consulting since 2017 at this point. It really seems like yesterday, but it's been a long time. But certainly love touch bases with FDA and keeping up to speed with everything that's going on. So just a nutshell, but what I love about my job really is seeing a lot of innovative technologies come out and then getting your hands dirty really really early on, but then also later stages as well. So we work with really small startups like one or two people, and then larger kind of multinational organizations too at various stages. So really happy to be on TTKU again.
Awesome. Thanks. And I kind of forgot, like, when did you start at FDA? Because we started right at about the same time, right?
I think it was 2009. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it
I
was
started in 20,
2009.
I started in 2009 too. I was thinking we were there at the, like most of the spread at the same time too. But well, cool. You know the drill. You get to start with your joke as well. Yeah, you
Sorry,
get to start.
I will be totally honest with you. I think I was mentioning to you, I am so bad at jokes, and so I tapped one of my children about 30 minutes before this call, and I was like, "Give me your best animal joke." It seems like, and he's like, "Mom, this is like from kindergarten." I'm like, "That's fine. At this point, I'm not going to use AI." So I don't know if this joke's been shared, but he allowed me to share with you. But what do you call a fish with no eyes?
What's that?
Psh. So
That's so
stupid.
dumb. I love it.
It is so dumb, right? So I gotta come up with something better. I
I
gotta
don't think
spend
so.
more
That
time
is
on
perfect. That is
it. Yeah.
exactly what we want. um,
Right.
I actually love that one. I like to get the ones that I'm gonna like remember and say again because they're easy and very silly. Those are my favorite. So that's a good one. Um, I also went with animal jokes because I was in Harrisburg this weekend, right next to Hershey, visiting friends. So it's cow country, and Hershey's chocolate because of the dairy cows around it. So, um, what did the farmer call the cow that had no milk?
No, utter something. I don't
An
know.
utter failure.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
you're almost there.
I was almost there. I just couldn't think
Yeah,
of the second word.
yeah. Well,
Yeah, we
uh,
gotta come up with something.
yeah, we'll come up with something. Okay. Well, I think we have some stuff to talk about this week. There hasn't been. I think we're starting to hit the summer schedule. There's a little bit of a slowdown. There wasn't as much, guidance is pushed out or as many clearances, but we did have some new ones. No new de novos, but I'm going to put out there, I'm still mad at the FDA that they're still like super far behind on some of these de novo summaries because there are two decision summaries that I am still waiting on, and
Waiting for.
they're both from 2024. And I'm like, come on, like they're really going to be helpful for my clients, and we're going to need Veronique to re-up her article again to get the FDA moving.
It was amazing how that article came out, and then all of a sudden, just magically, a bunch appeared. Yeah, so maybe you're right. You need
Yeah,
to just retag it.
I would say you and I could write it, but Veronique's so good at it. Let's just make let's just ask her to do it again.
Let's just ask her to do it. We'll tag her and say we
Yeah,
mentioned her.
yeah,
Now our name's out
yeah. We
there.
mentioned her. We're volunteering her to do things. Um, but there was one new PMA, and Caroline, I think did you put this one in the chat? I can talk about it a little bit, but do you want to maybe introduce it?
Yeah, I didn't do too much research into it because I was more focused on my love for myopia devices lately, but that's a separate issue and not even, isolated to this week. But I believe this one came out, I think we were mentioning it was a 2023 submission, but this one's for, I think, percutaneous closure of the femoral artery sites. And so it looks like it's an AbsorbaSeal, kind of a vascular closure device. But yeah, if you know more details about it, would love to kind of hear about it. But yeah, it's for it kind of those interventional cath procedures.
Yeah, I mean, both of us worked in cardio group, and
Hmm.
both have cardio backgrounds, but um, I think from a regulatory side, what is interesting, and we couldn't figure out what was going on, is the fact that it was submitted in November of 2023 and didn't get approval until just this week, which timeline mechanics for a PMA submission means that they totally missed all their MDUFA guidelines. So I'm curious what was unique about this one that caused such a delay because there are vascular closure devices out on the market. So this shouldn't have been super unique, but some of the things that were interesting about it was it's fully bioabsorbable. So maybe there was something with their bioabsorption that they needed to characterize. Um, but I don't know, you probably know this, but when they do these vascular closure, like so much of the interventional work in the coronary, you go up through the femoral artery and the groin,
Yep.
and but the hole that they puncture is pretty big, in like a pretty main
Yeah.
artery,
Hmm.
and like to close it up, the old way was like a nurse would literally sit on you with like a sandbag to like keep weight and pressure on that for long enough for it to like go on its own. So these vascular closure devices are super important because if they spring a leak or they don't work well, you can bleed out really fast. So it becomes like it's not just like a little nick where you've got like, oh, I'm bleeding a little bit. It's like, oh, you're dumping all the blood in your body quickly. So that's why they're PMAs and not, band-aids at a different location. So um,
Yeah, and we always think about kind of vascular access closure and having a reliable hemostasis, right? That can also allow you to, move around. Obviously, the puncture is very, very close to kind of to the groin area, usually for a lot of these cath procedures, and sometimes ambulation can become an issue. And people are obviously don't want a permanent implant, and they're not going to go that route. So, these vascular access kind of devices are really really important, but yeah, the reliability sometimes it's not always there, and so it's important to get that reliable hemostasis. So
yeah, cool. Um, Kind of jump to the next one. I didn't see any new HDEs either. I feel like I haven't seen very many HDs at all lately. Maybe I know that we as a in cardio, which we're recommending against companies when I was at FDA to do it because of the burden of maintaining an HDE. It's almost better
Hmm.
to go straight to PMA, and I think some FDA groups were more willing to grant PMA approval for orphan products rather than having them go through HDE. I don't know. Have you had any of that experience? Like,
Not on this side of FDA. I think, when we were at the agency, it's a two-stepped process because you have to get your humanitarian use, device kind of designation first. And that proved to be a bit more difficult than people would think, right? Understanding and canvassing it out. Almost always, at least in my experience, the indications would have to be really narrowed because, most companies commercialize, thinking about commercialization, they want to, cast a wider net for the indication so that more people can get their hands on the device. But oftentimes in the HCD space, you really have to narrow down the patient population age wise, condition wise, or like multiple conditions. Like you can have this condition, but you have to have this other clinical sequelae attached to it. And we found that to be pretty difficult. So, HDs again are very, very, I don't know, very rare, but pretty rare in terms of pre-market, applications or submissions. So, we just found that that two-step process was difficult at times. And so on this side of FDA, I have not had an experience with an HDE. Um,
yeah, I've done the HUD. I think I've same thing. I've done the HUD side, and it's even then like my one of my first experiences with it on the industry side. Um, we were working with Eric Chen and Katie Chowdhury on the in orphan products. Both of them were there, and both of them had been device reviewers at one point, and so I expected the conversation to be the same because it was my first time going through it, but it was a very different approach for that HUD in terms of like how to narrow. I learned a lot on how to do it through that first one, and we've gotten a couple other HUDs, but like that really clearly defined patient population. You have to pull from a lot of different data sources like
yeah.
claims data and society reviews and census data. Sometimes it's like sometimes you're making pretty broad stroke justifications of like everyone knows in their heart that's under the 8,000, but
Yeah.
how to prove they good vibes isn't going to work. They want like they need
Totally. Yeah.
documented proof of how you get there. It's harder than I think a lot of people exist. I totally agree with you.
And it's funny because, I do some work with, certain groups out of, the local universities here in the Research Triangle Park area. And you see that come up a lot in, early stage device companies. You'll see a lot of people say, well, we want to go for the HDE. It's a really rare condition. Nobody's caring for it. And so you want those technologies out there. But when oftentimes, at least this has happened multiple occasions, where they'll say it's really rare, but then it turns out it's not rare enough for an HUD. So that I think is really, really important to figure out early on.
Agreed.
So yeah,
Um,
but we haven't seen
all right.
many HDs come out
Yeah,
lately.
I think there was only one this year. But yeah, and I think economically, like it just makes sense, especially if the review groups are going to be willing to get you a smaller clinical trial to get to PMA. The effort to do both might not be
Yeah,
worth it. And your first PMA is free if you're doing pediatrics, which are often an HDE target. The PMA
yeah,
is free, and so you aren't bound by that maintenance of the HDE too, because the HDE is basically just a continuation of the clinical trial in terms of like reporting and how much
hmm
data monitoring, all that kind of stuff that needs to be upkept. So it's pretty expensive to maintain an HDE too.
yeah. And you also really hit on a really important point. Is a lot of them are pediatrics, and that's a vulnerable patient population. And there's other issues in terms of getting enrollment and all of that with pediatrics as well.
Yeah.
See,
Cool. Yeah. I think the next thing we wanted to talk about was we've got one new breakthrough announcement that I saw that was just in the press this week, but kind of when I dug into it, it's an old breakthrough, but they did a press release that their IDE got approved. And we do want to
yeah,
talk a little bit about clinical trials too. But the device that first publicly announced that they had breakthrough with the clinical trial approval was SpinaFX Medical. It's for their Triojection. So it's a minimally invasive, image-guided treatment for lumbar disc disease. And so that is about all I know about about it, other than lumbar disc disease is a kind of a literally pain in the back, and it's something that some of like the spinal fusion and different surgery options are never fully great because they limit a lot of your, they might take away the pain, but they're going to limit your mobility and things. There's a lot of drawbacks to those types of surgeries. So, um, Carolyn, you had some time in orthopedics. Do you know more about uh, maybe where this device was going?
Well, I think it affects, and there's been a, obviously, I wouldn't say an onslaught of devices that, are trying to address this, but, over the past, I would say, even 10 years, maybe that's not a short amount of time, but you do see a lot of, devices trying to target herniations, right? Lumbar disc herniations that aren't necessarily, you know, where you have discectomy and then you put in a solid device. Like a lot of times they're either injectables or more minimally invasive technologies. And I think Triojection kind of fits in that space. From what I know, again, I haven't, delved too much into the technology. They're working with some people that we know, wink, wink.
Okay.
So I think that in terms of the breakthrough, it was that they're treating this really serious condition, right? And debilitating condition. But I thought they used like some oxygen ozone only delivery system that reduces pressure within the disc. And then to do that,
Interesting.
it alleviates the nerve compression. So a very neat kind of way to attack a problem that really affects millions of people. So
Yeah.
I totally
Very
anticipate
cool.
seeing more in this space as well.
That's awesome. And I really do like when they sound like the breakthroughs are breakthrough. This sounds like a very big, like new thing that's really going to help a lot of people. So that's cool. And I'm glad they made it uh, to their IDE. Um, and there is some new stats on breakthrough that I wanted to discuss, but I also think one of the things that we have on the docket today was just some recent experiences with IDEs and clinical trials in general. So uh, let you tee that up for.
Yeah, no, and I think I'm posing that question, being the interviewer for you, because you have obviously a team to kind of handle that. But clinical trials for us lately, and again, it varies so much, especially in the device space. We call it the wild, wild west sometimes, right? No medical device clinical trial is the same. But certainly are seeing slightly more challenges in certain areas, obviously with enrollment, conflicting, obviously conflicts of interest with certain people, because a lot of physicians, right, or PIs or people that are known to do really good research in the clinical space have started their own companies, right? Whether that be something adjacent to the device that you want to get into humans via a trial, but we're seeing more of that lately. And was just curious about your experience, if you've seen more conflicts of interest, if you have other enrollment issues, whether your interactions with IRBs and certain IRBs, whether they be academic or more central, has been challenging at all. And maybe it hasn't.
I think we've run it with the conflicts we've over the last maybe couple years. I've seen it come up a little bit more in cardio trials because I feel like, especially in the interventional cardiology space, coming out of both drug-eluting stents and then TAVR procedures, especially, I think, and then all of the Watchman and LVAD type things, I think a lot of those doctors became kind of celebrities. There's a lot of like hit the groundbreaking, really cool new devices. They were the first people to be out there doing it. And I think those ones became very centralized and it's not a big group of people. And I think a lot of them have become, like you said, they've got their own CROs. They've got their own companies that they're involved as and so many different companies as med advisors that I have seen a little bit of conflict there. Um, on the enrollment side, I think we've been generally okay, but a lot of the trials that we've been approached with or been trying are a lot of borderline non-significant risk. So a lot of like digital
Mm,
health
okay.
type work, decentralized trials, which have been kind of a hot topic, and how to run those efficiently. Um, and yeah, I think. I don't think there's been too much hiccups as much with the IRBs, but there's been
Mhm.
definitely um, there's been some new things that we've been kind of being approached with, like especially on the decentralized trials. I think that's been an interesting, more common thing to be running, and how you run it and how you monitor the data and things like that. So um, one other thing we've seen a lot of is with the real world evidence and guidances that have come out, and the push for accepting more of that. And then I
Yeah.
feel like there's always a cycle of where do people want to run their first in human trial. And right
Yeah.
now, I don't know about you, but it seems like it's a lot of Uzbekistan, Georgia, Turkey,
Hmm.
like Eastern Europe, Western Asia countries. I don't know. Have you seen a bunch of like or other new geographies where you're seeing first in man trials?
For certain device types, right? So, the vascular devices and also orthopedics I've seen in the Eastern Europe space. Obviously, a lot of the vascular folks go down to Central America, sometimes South America, and also places in Europe. So we are, but that's been traditional. I feel like that hasn't shifted too much. We really are trying to, have more trials run in the U.S. And I think FDA is pushing that too, right? At least one site in the U.S. Even though we know that they do accept OUS data, but there are so many issues that come with that for some companies, obviously they don't have the budget to run certain U.S. clinical trials, but uh, you know, just showing standard of care. Ethnicity is coming up in a lot of the feedback as well to say, is this reflective of the ethnicity that the U.S. patient might have? So that those have been consistent, but slightly more pronounced maybe lately out of the agency from my experience.
Yeah, I think that adds equals what we're seeing too. I think the other place I just kind of remembered is I think Australia changed their regs a little bit over the last couple of years to make it easier to do early feasibility, first in human type studies there first. And I think the FDA is more accepting of the data from Australia to support endpoints as feasibility data, or maybe you'd still end up having to do some US work, but they'll allow it as poolable or leverageable toward the US data too. So that's been um, nice to see.
Yeah, I think the FDA certainly has been more open to receiving that real world data, understanding and, accepting justifications for why that would be acceptable. Almost always you have to do a sensitivity analysis to make sure that it doesn't skew the data. Um, but, barring any of that, it's been acceptable. So it's worth a shot. I've only seen Australian data work for almost post market, like in the real world evidence space, not a prospective trial. So
Got one that we're hoping right now.
yeah,
Let's see how I'll update the group some other day.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. Um, we kind of jumped into the clinical stuff on breakthrough. I did want to, because of the breakthrough announcement, there was on CDRH New, they released some of the breakthrough statistics from the first quarter of 2026. And so if you go onto the website, and if I figure out how to do this, I will post the link later. Um, the they kind of break down how many new ones, but what was interesting is through March 31st, there have already been 80 breakthrough designations, and which would kind of push that forward. That's 320 in the year. If you
Yep.
do 80 per quarter, the most in any year prior to this was 206 in 2021. So we're
Hmm.
on pace to blow the record out of the water for breakthrough device designations, which actually aligns with something that Allison and I have talked about in previous podcasts, that we thought there might be more breakthroughs, and this is good statistics to show that that is true. I don't know, have your clients been still pushing for breakthrough? Have you had more successes lately?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten a number of breakthroughs in. And it's continuing. It's a very, very high demand, right? Investors want to see it. That's typically, one of the reasons why you see sponsors wanting to get breakthrough device designation. The other is, people will link it to reimbursement, getting certain codes available to them. So that's another thing. But I would say almost all startups have considered, right, the breakthrough or the step, obviously depending on your indications, program to get that through. I'm just not seeing a lot of traction in step personally, but I think because the indications fit more breakthrough. And we are seeing a lot of breakthroughs go in and get accepted. Some without any like additional questions, others with more questions. But certainly it is narrowed down, and you really have to hammer in the indication and select that indication really wisely, because that's the lens through which they're going to evaluate your technology and the evidence you have. But I would say that across the board over the past 2 or 3 years, it's always required some level of clinical evidence, clinical validation. Doesn't have to be a huge study, but some level. I haven't gotten any through, nor have I really tried at this point to get stuff through without any clinical data. So I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
that's
same for
really
you.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually fully agree with that. I think we've leveraged some like theoretic, like not necessarily clinical data on the device itself, but like the this has been shown to work. This type of therapy has been shown to work in patients before, and we're making that type of therapy better. Like that argument has worked. Not, but especially for physical devices where we have some of the software as medical devices that are doing diagnostics or risk assessment for certain diseases, that's been requiring actual clinical on their software or algorithm for sure. Um,
And I think Laura talked about that too, in terms of the AIML aspect, about how much that's coming through. Not necessarily only for breakthrough, but just in general. That is a huge push for, certain technologies, and then adding the AI components to it.
yeah, fully
Yeah.
agree. Everyone's trying to put that extra AI layer on things that may already exist, or doing it in phases. And in speaking with some of the clients, it's almost become a requirement to differentiate yourself from like in the market. If you don't have some sort of connection with the EHR, additional machine learning, like algorithm development around your device, it's tough to get in, to get market access. I think it makes your regulatory pathway tougher, and that's what you and I are usually
Yeah.
concerned about. But,
Yeah.
ultimately, the easy reg pathway doesn't get you anything if you can't sell it. So,
Back in the day, there used to be an argument saying, look, I have this technology and it's going to be an adjunct to clinical decision making. Or it's like, this just gives the clinician another thing that they can use in their toolbox. Do you find that that argument is receiving more pushback lately? It used to be pretty clear, and it was like, okay, then it de risks, I think, a lot of things for you. But personally, that argument is just not robust enough without having other safeguards within the AML space.
I actually, yes, definitely become tougher, and I actually think I don't think the FDA's ever done a great job. Certain groups are better than others, but has ever done a great job with the concept of adjunct or screening.
Yeah.
It kind of always had to live up to the highest bar. We I've talked about this before too, of also like where, yes, we understand there might be a tool that is amazing, but it's only available in Mass General and no one can get to it because it's super expensive. We're going to make a tool that is available in, you know, Lancaster, PA. Or, that's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people in Lancaster. I couldn't think of a smaller town.
Hmm.
But, something like that where, um, you know, the access aspect of tools and adjunct and screening and things like that, that maybe if you pass this, then you go up to the higher, MedStar in DC where they have these things, has always been a difficult argument with the FDA.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, it, and it is tough because you don't want to like open up the floodgates where all of a sudden this cheaper option that doesn't work as well is now the standard of care. But on the flip side, that's not what they're trying to do. It's a tough art. I could see it both ways, but Um, yeah, we're actually running into that with a couple of clients right now where the FDA is pushing back on the actual clinical utility, and we're like, we have lots of
Totally. Yep.
clinicians that say they would love to have this because it's a quick, do I need to do this more invasive procedure or not
Mm-hmm.
kind of idea. And if it's, even low accuracy, it's like checking your blood pressure. It's like, you don't make every decision on one metric, but it's a metric. And I think the FDA is tough with that, especially with newer metrics.
Yeah, and it goes back to something, an idea that, really has been embedded in FDA for as long as I've known, it's benefit risk. But now it has to be very, very explicit. And I would say the majority of submissions that sometimes we overlooked. Really, it was like, oh, we have an entire section for that in the PMA, and we always knew that. But now it's, even 510Ks, sometimes, we're seeing that, pre submissions, we're writing it in a lot of different places.
Yeah, this came up, and I think you were the person that brought it up. Putting benefit risk into 510Ks, and we've actually over the last just this year, I would say in 2026, most of our 510Ks that we've submitted have had some sort of like using the guidance, walking through the questions, kind of benefit risk argument in there. And I think it's a good idea. It's probably something that we unintentionally lost from previous like iterations because it wasn't being asked for. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's a good idea to put in there. I haven't done it as much on pre-subs, but now that you mentioned it, we probably, that's something that we probably should consider as well.
Right, because they're usually like in pre-subs, obviously it very much it runs the gamut of what kind of feedback you're going to get depending on the questions, but a lot of it is this testing, addressing the risk to health. Is it, is this, animal study sufficient to FDA's liking? And it almost always has a we don't know if your device will do this, and that's the risk. So if you at least discuss it and then talk about, the benefit outweighing the risk, I think it helps with the feedback as well. It makes it a little bit cleaner, in my opinion.
Agreed. Totally. Um, all right. Let's go we got a couple more things to chat about, and I think one of the ones that you have on here, because I think it is you've got things is the myopia treatment, and we touched on it a little bit last week, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the broad myopia.
Yeah, no, and I think, different technologies have been around, right? We've had the pharmaceutical treatments with atropine, which dilate your eyes. Obviously, it kind of slows the progression of the axial length kind of growth. And then you also have the what they call ortho K. Those are those hard lenses that basically compress like the top layer of your eye and press down on the cornea while you sleep, and then you take them out and your vision is restored, which is wild. It's basically a hard piece of plastic that you put on your eyeball. You sleep in it in the morning, you take them off, and it kind of, because it shortens that distance, you're able to gain most of your vision back, and you have almost perfect eyesight for the duration of the day, maybe even a little bit longer, and then you put them on back at night. So you sleep in these lenses. These are gas permeable lenses, and that's been around for a while. But what that does is it delays, or it's kind of hopefully right keeps the myopia from progressing. So when you have little kids that have they're on screen so early, and the Surgeon General just came out with that warning. Did you see that? It was like kids age 6 and 18 should not be on their screen for more than 2 hours. How is that going to happen, right? Like they do all their schoolwork on their Chromebooks and all of that. But I think myopia is becoming a bigger issue. So last fall, Essilor came out with the Stellest lenses, and I told Allison that I want to talk about this on a blue stocking thing, but I'm so obsessed with these different myopia treatments because I think that a lot more people are getting impacted just with screens and being stuck with their faces in a phone. That we're just seeing kids younger and younger need glasses to treat that nearsightedness. Anyways, these are glasses, so obviously you don't want your 5-year-old if they need glasses to put on little hard lenses at night.
Yeah.
I about lost my mind when my son he uses Ortho K, and I'm a strong believer in how that's done, and it's definitely arrested his myopia progressive. But it took him like 45 minutes to try to get one lens in, and I was like, I'm out. I'm tapping out. I can't do this because he would keep blinking before he did it, and I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do this. Um, and so these are eyeglasses that you put on and you wear them. It corrects your vision because it has a central vision kind of correction, just like normal spectacles. But then it has basically, you know, ways to defocus. And this is all public information on their website. But now kids can wear glasses that helps, reduce the progression of myopia. So anyways, this
So
neat
cool.
technology is coming through. It was a de novo that was granted. There's obviously a couple other devices that have come through. Ortho-K is now exploded. I think atropine is now on label. So we're just seeing, even in the past like 5 years, just this space kind of progress. So I'm not an eye person, but I've just been so intrigued by different things that people are doing, like the pediatric, like this is, it affects people in the pediatric space because you just see really fast myopia progression. So just make sure to get
That's
all your kids' eye checked and, watch
yeah.
your eyes too. It's
How
scary.
how old do you get kids eye checked? Because I'm like, my daughter's about to turn 3. I don't think she's had her eyes checked yet. Uh, probably at her 3, probably pretty soon.
Yeah, they start with, that whole like you cover one eye and you like go to the doctor's office and you see if the numbers start turning blurry. I think when they caught my son, he was like 7 and he couldn't quite make the last row and they're like, "Oh, you should go see an eye doctor." And then at that point it was a -1, and then 6 months later it was a -2. 6 months
Oh,
later it
wow,
was a -3, and I was like, if you keep on this track,
you're
then
fine.
what happens is that obviously once you get to a really really bad prescription, your axial length, I've learned with someone, it just grows, like your eyeball grows this way, like long wise here, and you increase the risk of like retinal detachment, and obviously that causes blindness and things like that. So um,
Is your
he was only
eye
9.
literally is your eye
Yeah,
literally doing like plants grow to the sun? It's like growing to like go to the screen and getting
yeah.
longer.
I don't know that that
Interesting.
is the exact reason.
Well,
I would
yeah,
have
probably
to
not, but
talk to.
like, yeah,
Yeah, but it is
Lee
actually
Cram,
growing
if
this
he's
way.
listening, is probably like, you guys are idiots, but
You're right, right. Please correct us. Yeah,
yeah.
but that's my understanding is that they check for that axial length, and obviously there's certain things when puberty hits, you grow a certain way, but um, at least the way that the eye doctor was telling us was that you're trying to slow that axial growth down and kind of preserve that so that when they get older, their eyesight isn't like a -10 in each eye. So it seems to have helped.
Nice.
Yeah.
I my my hearing and my smell are terrible, but my eyes have always been good so far. But my mom just got diagnosed with some like macular degeneration, so I have to go get my eyes like checked to see if that's going to be a thing for myself. But um, my wife has been wearing glasses since she was like 6, so
Mhm.
we're like, my daughter, are you going to have which version of your eyes are you going to get? But we'll see. And
But at least
do
there's
all your do
technology.
all your kids wear glasses or just
No, just one of them. So one
interesting?
out of three, and then my husband and I wear glasses, and I am pretty blind without my contacts in. But there are, I progressed really quickly, and then all of a sudden stopped. So I think that happens as well because then you stop growing, and your eyes kind of get used to it. My husband's prescription is really really low, so I think that helps. But yeah, the progression was just wild. Thinking not only do I have to get new glasses every 6 months, but the trajectory, you just don't know how bad it's going to get. So get your
Huh?
eyeballs checked.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
Um, what else do we got on here? A couple other small things. I saw a classification order. Um, I don't know if I've had some issues with the. Did you pull these off of CDRH new?
Yes, and
Okay.
you can't. The links are dead, at least from
So
my end.
yeah, I think so CDRH new has been catching up for like 5 years of de novos because I think they never posted them. So a lot of these are
Yeah.
really old, but the ones that came out this week are spinal muscular atrophy newborn screening test system. Generally these are either for de novo. They're generally for a de novo had this, and they are finally posting the link to it. But like you said, most of the links are broken, so that's not
Yeah.
super useful, but. The other one was a point of care device to directly detect COVID, um, and combined acoustic and electrical external stim for the relief of tinnitus, which I kind of vaguely remember that de novo when it came out was it was a weird sound electrical stimulation to fix the kind of buzzy electrical noise that you have in your ear. So it was like a kind of a counterintuitive thought of how to fix that. So
Super neat. And that one, when did that one come out? I thought it's been a while.
it's been a while. These are often the
Yeah, they're
CDRH new.
overrated.
It's been a weird. I kind of have been filtering them out because I
Yeah.
don't know what they're in reference to until I feel like they've caught up. And they
Mhm.
seem to be going from pretty far back and catching up. But
Yeah.
the announcement, I think we've want to just keep this on everyone's radar. July 22nd, as we talked about, they re-upped
Yeah.
they updated the human factors guidance. The FDA has been way more focused on human factors over the last couple of years, I think, across a lot of medical devices. And um, although, and then so they've kind of finally updated. There was a draft guidance, and now it's final, and they're going to have
Yeah.
a town hall uh, workshop. I'm kind of bummed it's only a town hall and it's only an hour because those have become sometimes pre-recorded and very limited interaction. I like when there's ones that are going to really affect like across the center. I like
Yeah.
when they do a workshop and have like the full afternoon, but that's a lot of resource to do too. So
True. In a time of still transition. But I think it's important to mention, obviously, the old guidance, I wouldn't say old, but it is now 10 years old, where the application of kind of how you do human factor site, that's not going away. This one is just talking about what evidence and documentation do you need to submit to FDA. So they're really supposed to be using conjunction. So I've gotten that question too. They're like, oh, the old one goes away. And I'm like, no, all that, the concepts and stuff there, and the, obviously references to the applicable guidance are still there. But this is kind of a new add-on.
yeah, that's a really good point because I think people think of it as two different ones, but they're kind of together. Like you said, the software guidances used to be like that too, where there was kind of like here's the content and here's how you do it.
Right.
Right. Um, what was I gonna say? The I had something I wanted to mention. I forgot what it was. So
It'll come back.
we'll just yeah, it might come back. I think another one that came out, and I don't think we talked about it last week, but it came out right before last week. Was the FDA put out a draft guidance on communication with payers and formula committees and similar entities. So it is a draft guidance on what information device manufacturers can proactively share with payers
Mhm.
around clinical outcomes, economic analysis, anticipated indications and evidence, and reimbursement planning. And the reason this is kind of important is because there is a line of not being able to promote and commercialize products before you have clearance to sell. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, what do you have? Did you ever run into this where companies like were not able to get too far ahead of planning um, with reimbursement because they weren't already 510(k) cleared or PMA approved?
I haven't had direct experience with that being an issue. I think most companies do it in tandem, right? To kind of have a reimbursement strategy along with kind of the regulatory strategy. And you have to do that, fairly early. Where I've seen some of that come in is disagreement during a clinical trial, right? What category is it? And things like that. That's probably where I've seen it the most. I haven't seen it, really create a ton of friction. I wouldn't say it doesn't exist, but in terms of it really stifling, like them not being able to do one thing or the other, it's usually a bigger issue that kind of drives it, in addition to reimbursement.
Yeah, that's generally been my experience, but I have run into um, folks feeling like they weren't able to share things with payers too early.
I
And
see.
I, I, I think this is good guidance from the FDA to kind of say, one, remind small companies to be like, hey, when you're searching all of device advice, this is something you should be communicating with doing, and then also clarifying some rules on what you're allowed to communicate with payers too was important. So good guidance by the FDA. They've been pretty prolific over the last year. I feel like there's been a lot of guidance.
Yeah. I would say, though, and this is a shout out to the TAP program, I would say that in this space, they've been very, very helpful, meaning talking about, the issues with payers, who the payers are, the reimbursement strategy, connecting people and sponsors to certain, people at CMS. That's been, and I think we're going to see more of that. We saw that at the MDIC summit, right? They're going to have that. Now, what that tactically looks like, I think it remains to be seen, but we're already seeing kind of the benefits of it, at least through the TAP program. Again, you have to cross a couple hurdles to get to the TAP program, and not everybody's eligible, but just shout out for people who are in TAP to really utilize that aspect and get people, connect with people through FDA.
For sure. And I think that's going to extend into that rapid program if it
Yeah.
gets fully approved, which it looks like it will.
Mhm.
And um, our issue with the reimbursement folks is in our TAP clients has been getting the CDRH and FDA side has been really responsive and like, hey, you should think about this and giving good hints and getting the external folks to the table has been difficult for our clients. But we'll see. I think the rapid program is going to kind of force a little bit more under decree or whatever the
Yeah.
official term is.
Right.
So that will be that could be helpful too.
I also think that we should come up with like a one pager or like a little pocket brochure on all these acronyms. Because
Yes,
rapid, tap, tempo,
I think there's four
right?
different readies.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
need a cheat sheet. There's so many. I love it though. At least it's better than saying the whole name out. But
yeah. I think
so
they
many.
do. I think they do need an acronym czar at FDA to make them better,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and make them not repeatable. But I
Yeah.
do appreciate good ones. Um,
Very true.
Speaking of a good acronym that I like is UTAMED. It just makes me think of
Udamed.
Utaman. Yeah.
Yep.
um,
Great. Now
um,
that's the thing I want to think about.
yeah,
Udamed.
every time.
I love
Yeah.
it.
It's but for those people who work in European regulations, it's now mandatory. That's been on the radar forever, but that actually went mandatory in effect at the end of May. And so right now we're in the first couple weeks of it being fully mandatory. There's already been some IT hiccups in the system, but they're trying. So, um, and then um, the other thing that came out on the Europe front, when we don't always talk a ton about Europe, but I do,
Yeah.
I have a couple clients that have been more Europe heavy, and so I've been making sure I've been paying attention. Was they implemented Regulation 2026-977, which establishes uniform requirements and timelines for conformity assessment and notified body activities. I just saw this come out like this morning, so I haven't dove into it. It sounds awesome if it's truly
Yep.
going to put like some directed timelines on things. Did you get a chance to look at this at all?
I didn't. I don't do a
Okay,
ton of work in the EU other than kind of the information that I have for people trying to get into the US, but they're also doing stuff for the EU. But right, this one's a big deal if they can get a more streamlined process. I think the biggest deal is that timelines are very long and
crazy.
sometimes very short, and it's just not predictable. And I think the predictability part is the part that I'm really seeing or keeping my eyes open to see if that will happen.
Yeah, me too. I think I'm excited to see what that. We'll probably have more updates on that in the next couple of episodes. But as we learn more about it, but I'm excited if that actually is a kind of Meduthma like timeline. They're being held to certain timelines for certain types of devices and things like that. That would be awesome.
Yep.
Um,
And maybe that's something that, maybe a shout out to those thinking about going to RAPS Convergence in Charlotte. Come talk to us.
yeah,
We'd love to. Kind of Allison, Melissa, and I are going to be having the party house. Let's just
party
say,
house.
yeah,
I
I'm looking
I'm
forward to it.
still I'm still a maybe because I've got other travel around it, but if I can make it, I will just drive down and maybe I won't go to the conference. I'll just come hang out at the party house.
That works.
Yeah,
We're looking forward to it.
yeah. Um, cool. I think we covered everything. Anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, that was it.
Sweet.
Allison was like, sometimes it's only 30 minutes, or like
It's never.
sometimes
It hasn't
20.
been 30 minutes since like the first episode when it was just the
Yeah,
two of us. So,
right. There's
um,
too much to
well,
talk about, so I love it.
there's too much to talk about. Where can people find you?
I'm like, I don't know why I was so confused.
If
I'm
you
like in my house or like at the local
knock on my
coffee shop.
door in North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. You can find me on averareg.com. That's just our website. My son did mention though, he's like, Mom, your website is really bad. I'm like, okay, maybe that's something that you could do to fix it.
Yeah, get the word, kid.
Yeah. But obviously LinkedIn, hit me up there and, love to kind of chat with people, but certainly love, obviously chatting with old friends anytime.
Yeah, it was awesome to have you on, and welcome back anytime. Maybe the next time me and Allison will both be here.
Yes.
You're not um, always the stepchild person coming in.
Nice.
Um, for me, you can always find me on LinkedIn or nilomedicalconsulting.com. I actually think we have nilomed.com now as of recently. Um, and next week, we will have a fun sibling event. I think both Allison and I siblings will be joining us for next week's pod. So
That's
that'll be fun.
amazing.
Yeah, we're going to do a little keep it in the family episode. So for everyone else, it's been fun. Talk to you next week. Bye.
Sounds good. Talk to you later. Bye.
Hold on, rewind. What did they say? Allison and Nilo just winging away. Regs and guidance, we'll try our luck. Just two folks out here trying to keep